Welcome back to the studio. Today, we're going to talk about leather glues. We're going to look at a few different things. The first is we're going to look at what leather glues are generally used for. And then we're going to look at different types of leather glues to see which ones may make the most sense to use. And then lastly, we're going to look at the tools that can be used along with leather glue to make applying them and working with them easy as can be. So with that, let's dive right in. Leather glues are typically used to join pieces of leather together. And this could be either temporarily or permanently. And some are meant to be removed and some are meant to be fixed so that leather will essentially never come apart. And it'll depend on the type of crafting that you're doing or the type of purpose that you've got that will determine, which type of glue you want to use. So for example, depending on the application that you've got, these two pieces of leather may be something that you want to stitch together, or they may be something that you want to glue together. And so essentially there are a wide variety of circumstances when you'd use glue on leather, but in general that's what leather glue is used for, to secure pieces of leather together temporarily or permanently. So let's check out a few different types. There are primarily going to be about 3 different types. We have our specialized leather glue. We also have another one here, leather weld, and they're formulated to work with leather fibers, and obviously these are to work with suede as well. So that's your first type, is a dedicated leather glue. The next type we have is a contact cement. It's really useful when you're looking for more permanent bonds. It is a very, very strong type of adhesive, and something to keep in mind with contact cement, you generally want to apply it to both surfaces and then wait till that dries and then secure that. When you do that, the cement will bind to itself and it's already been bound to the leather. And you're going to get a really, really tight bond with that kind of glue. And the third type we have are your standard glues. This is going to be like your Elmer's glue. Here we have a craft spray bond. You could use crazy glues, gorilla glues. It's just going to depend what type of bond that you want and then how that may affect the fibers. And so this craft bond is going to be a more temporary bond. So if you're looking to glue things before you sew them, or you're looking to glue something down during pattern making and then move it, this will be a good option because it's temporary. It's a very light bond, and glue all is temporary as well. So those are the 3 categories. We have your dedicated leather glues. We have your contact cement. When it comes to types of leather glue, we typically have different ones that we could look at. First, we have our dedicated leather glues, and these are formulated particularly for use on leather. This one's obviously good for suede as well, and there are varieties out there like that that are made just for leather, and they work very well, certainly with leather types. Another option we have a very, very strong bond and is used often on leather and is intended primarily to be a permanent bond. And something to keep in mind with contact is where with usual glues you could apply it to one side and then join the material. With contact cement, it is often best to apply it to both sides, wait for it to dry, and then when you secure those pieces together, it's going to create essentially a permanent bond. The last is our general glue. Pretty much any adhesive that you have, can work on leather. And so it's important to just keep in mind what your intended end use is, permanent, temporary, things like that. And then you could choose the glue that will work. For example, here's a spray craft bond. It makes a very light bond. This is great if you're doing something like, adhering to pieces prior to sewing, or if you're doing pattern making and want to secure some areas, while you're tracing and cutting patterns. Something like this could work. And that'll cover pretty much the range of what will work well with leather. One great tool are things called glue spreaders. And they're essentially plastic tools that have relatively narrow, sharp edges, and they're used to smooth and flatten the glue on the leather to help you get a consistent joining surface. So let's take a look at an example of what this does. So we'll just take some leather, we'll put some glue down. Now, if you were typically just running a bead of glue, when you were to join these materials, it would kind of press out and you get a little more glue towards that end, a little less over here. So a glue spreader essentially just spreads that out so you can have a very flat, consistent surface for joining. And that way you have a relatively consistent bond, when you push these materials together. So glue spreaders helps make a smooth surface when you're joining your leather together. Metal rollers are another good tool used for gluing, and they're essentially made up of a solid metal roller attached to what's usually a wooden handle, and then they are pushed and pulled over leather to help join two pieces together. So for example, if we're going to use these two, and imagine they were glued, what we'd be able to do is take this roller and roll it over the leather, and it does two things. One, because it's relatively smooth, even surface, it will not mark up the leather surface as long as you don't push too hard. And then two, because of the weight, they're pretty dense steel, it will help apply pressure and flatten these two pieces together, allowing the adhesive to join the two surfaces relatively easily and consistently. So that'll make a good bond, and once that dries, you'll have a nice, even, smooth glue joint. So these are pretty fun. They last a while, and yeah, they're a good tool to have if you find yourself gluing a lot of flat objects a lot. Next, we have two tools, a wire brush and a leather rougher. And these are essentially used to roughen the surface of leather because that helps expose more of the fibers, creating additional surface area for that glue to bind to. So like for example, right here, we have a smooth piece of leather. And if we are to rough it, let's use the leather rougher here. We can see now we have a little bit of a rougher surface with little grooves, little cuts. And so when this is glued to another piece, the glue will be able to bind onto these little ridges and cuts a lot easier than a smoother surface. And so to do that, we could use a wire brush, or we could also use a dedicated leather rougher. The rougher has pretty much a very, cut out end where there's a textured pattern here in the steel. And so that makes it easy to then, rub it over the leather, and through friction, create those little ridges and cuts. So if you're looking for a strong permanent bond, that's a great option because obviously once you roughen that leather, it's going to have those cuts in there forever. So this is great for when you're making strong bonds between leather where those surfaces will not be seen. The bone folder. So this is a tool that's made of natural bone. It can be used to help smooth glued areas. And because it's relatively smooth, it won't leave marks on the leather. And so it allows you to put a pressure that can help push out air bubbles, any kind of gaps in the glue, and make for a very nice, smooth, consistent surface across that gluing application. The wool dauber. So this is a pretty cool tool, and depending on how you like to glue things, it can be useful. And so where we can apply glue either just by putting it on the leather with the glue container. We could also obviously use our finger to flatten that. We can use the other tools to kind of spread that, like a glue spreader. There is also this wool dauber, and what it will do is it will pick up the glue and then allow us to kind of spread it out how we'd like. So if you're working with a thicker glue, because this definitely absorbs some of it while you are using it, but if you're using a thicker, heavier glue on a wider surface and you want a little bit of almost texture in that gluing area so that it's dense and kind of sticks really well, this could be an option to use. And these are wool daubers. So while gluing could be an important part of leathercraft, there you have a look into the three most common types of glues that are used. We've checked out some of the more popular tools to help make sure you have a good surface that will help with your adhesion and overall lasting quality of that gluing work. And then we looked at some things that make it easier, depending on if you want to use something to apply it that is flat, like a glue spreader, or wool daubers, or other tools that you can use to make gluing easier and more effective. So, thinking about gluing, there you have it. If you have questions, let us know. If you have opinions or different experiences or would like to share, let us know too. And until next time, keep crafting.